I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tania, who is a brilliant writer and the author of the critically acclaimed novel Loot and several other celebrated works of fiction. Her writing masterfully blends historical depth with contemporary relevance, exploring themes of colonialism, identity, and art through vividly drawn characters and intricate plots. Her latest novel takes us on a thrilling journey from 18th century Mysore to Europe, following a Muslim woodcarver's unexpected adventures. Please join me in welcoming Tania James.
Thank you so much, Sree. I just quickly have to say thank you all for hanging in there. And it's such a bucket list thing for me to be on stage at the Asia Society. And so thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Tania. And this is really one of those iconic stages in New York, and you have been on many, many of the world's most important stages. But let's start with talking about Loot. And it starts with Tipu's tiger, a fascinating historical artifact. Tell us about that and how you came to be interested in it.
Yeah, Tipu's tiger, well, I had published 3 books of fiction, and I was sort of searching around for something new to write about, and I just kept writing novels that failed halfway through, and I couldn't find the thing. I was searching for the thing, and I happened across this automaton called Tipu's Tiger. Has anybody heard of it or seen it? Some people here probably. It's a 6-foot-long wooden tiger that's mauling the throat of an English soldier. And back in the day when it actually worked, you could turn a hand crank, and the tiger would grunt, and the soldier would groan and kind of flap his hand pathetically, and all while organ music was sort of playing in the background. And I just thought it was the strangest thing, like the strangest and most somehow exciting thing I'd come across. It was commissioned by a South Indian ruler called Tipu Sultan around the turn of the 18th century, and I didn't know why I was so obsessed with this thing. It was so charming in some weird, dark way. It was sinister. It was like no other piece of Indian art I'd seen from that time, and I just find that for me with a novel, the key is not to kind of try to figure out why I'm obsessed with something, it's to give that obsession to a character, which I did. And so that is how the sort of novel took off. I started imagining characters around this object.
And you take that obsession, give it to the characters, and then transform that and transfer that to your readers.
Yes, initially I thought this is going to be a heist novel. I really loved the idea. I really wanted to write an English country house novel. I don't know why. I love English country houses. I thought, why not? And so I thought it's going to be about 2 people who are trying to get this object back. And then I started thinking about who would care enough about this automaton to want to get it back. And so I started thinking about the artist who made it, and I traced his path all the way back to India. And so that's how the novel sort of got built backwards.
And your protagonist, Abbas, moves between these very unusual and different worlds, Mysore to France to pirate ships. And how did you approach writing such diverse scenes in your story and in the novel?
Well, I kind of feel like, for me, writing a novel is just requires repeatedly fooling yourself into thinking it's going to be easier than it is. And so initially I thought, I'm just going to write this country house novel. It's going to be set in England. It'll take place over the course of a week. And then I was like, okay, I guess I have to go to India and learn about Mysore around 1790s. And then I get to the part, well, oh, here is the character now moving to France, so I guess I have to learn about ships, the ship that took him there. So it's sort of just step by step. If I started out knowing I'm going to write a novel that takes place in 3 different countries and involves all these things, I just would quit. But yeah, I just kind of slowly sort of, just fool myself into thinking this is going to be easy.
Yeah, and that's the way to survive the writing process. How many of you here would have written a book or are writing a book or thinking of writing a book? Raise your hands. All right, and then the other half are lying, right? Because they don't want to raise their hands. But this process of writing, I hope you heard her say that she started and failed on several novels along the way. I mean, I think that's really important and reassuring for many people in this room. So talk about that. And you've obviously been a successful writer already, so that's a different thing than for some of us in the room. But talk about that process.
I mean, it was a sort of interesting time in my life because I had published 3 books and then I had kids. And so that changed things. I had 2 children in 2014 and 2018, and then I took a full-time tenure-track teaching job. And so suddenly there were these stresses on my time, but I don't even think that was really the problem. It was more, I was pushing the work to come out. I was just trying to write and write and write. I think more just to reassure myself that I had an identity outside of the home, that I still was a writer. And I think that was good for me in one sense, but for the work, I don't know that that's good, but it's because it's coming from a place of insecurity or ego in some way. And in some way, I think writing, for it really to work, you almost have to forget, I almost have to forget my own body. I almost have to forget everything around me for the work to really sort of flow. So anyway, I think, it took me a long time to kind of get my bearing again, and then it also just kind of takes arriving at the right thing at the right time. So that I happened across that automaton, and it just happened to be the right timing, I think.
And it was interesting that you also said that you needed that assurance and the reassurance that you were somebody beyond what you were doing at home and being part of the family. But you're also a professor, and that wasn't enough. You wanted to go back to the writer in you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, for me, those 2 roles in my life are intertwined. And I don't think I could be a professor without writing. I feel like with my students, I want them to feel like I'm walking this road alongside you. I'm learning from you. We are learning these things together. So I'm constantly talking about my process and how the frustrations I'm having, and so, yeah, it's important to me to keep writing. I don't think I could be, I think when I go for long stretches without writing, I feel like I have a gray cloud over my head, and I just can't, I'm just itching to get to something.
Dorothy Parker famously said that she prefers having written to doing the writing or having the writing to be done. Where are you in that camp?
Well, okay, I agree with her. I do like having written, although actually my favorite is sitting down to write, that moment before you've actually done anything. And it feels like the world is open with possibility. And then it's by hour 1 when I realize I haven't really done anything yet that I'm starting to hate it. But when I have the coffee in my hand and sort of the blank page before me, to me, that's the best.
So I heard coffee. Tell me a little bit more. What else is your writing style? What's the software, if any? You're writing on a legal pad. Which kind of room are you in? Or the door locked?
Door locked. Yeah, no, not in my house. Unfortunately, my kids don't believe in privacy. So, I mean, I think I try to be pretty flexible about the conditions, just because I find it's better for your survival as a writer to be flexible. The one thing I do have is these pair of headphones, which they don't cancel noise, but in some way, I like having one thing that I've trained myself to feel like I'm entering into this other space, and I don't use it for anything other than writing. But that's the one thing I enjoy having.
The weight of it, is there music coming through?
There's nothing coming through.
Happening. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a costume, a concentration costume. Yeah.
But it works. We'll go back to the lute, but let's tell them a little bit about your other books as well. The Atlas of Unknowns. Give us a quick synopsis of it.
Oh, it's about sisters. They're both from Kerala, India, and one of them comes to the States as an exchange student, and she runs away from her host family. And so it's about these 2 sisters coming back together.
All right, and I loved aerograms, which for those of you, if you're not from India, that's a kind of postal piece of postage history that connected the world in India and other places, and that was the title of one of your books.
Yeah, I remember with my publisher, we talked a little bit about this. Should we rename it something else because Americans won't know what aerograms are. But I think actually no one has ever brought that up to me. I feel like more people know about it than they give them credit for.
And then the tusk that did the damage.
Yeah. So that one is set in a South Indian wildlife park, and it takes 3 perspectives, and one of them is a rogue elephant, and it sort of explores questions of human-elephant conflict and conservation and land rights. Yeah.
And those are issues that, of course, transcend so many stories. The loot touches on themes of colonialism and cultural appropriation that feel very relevant today. Was this intentional, and how do you see these historical issues connecting the past and the present?
I mean, I think colonialism is sort of baked into the premise, just because the object was, it wasn't made during the colonial period necessarily, because Mysore was not yet, was still under the control of the Mysore Sultanate, but I think it's sort of,
But it reflected what was in the air, what was happening around Mysore.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think too much about these themes, and I try not to think too hard about themes, because for me, I want as much freedom as possible to imagine my own way into this world. And if I start thinking in these larger terms, I start thinking about experts who know way more than I do, and then I start borrowing ideas from people who are smarter than I am on these subjects, and then the work is no longer mine. I mean, I think about Beloved by Toni Morrison, which was based on a real-life enslaved woman named Margaret Garner. But I remember Toni Morrison said, I didn't do any research because I wanted the freedom. Like, she knew maybe a paragraph about this woman, but she wanted the freedom to be able to kind of take risks and go where she wanted to go. And so that's sort of how I feel about theme. I sort of allow these concepts to emerge, but I'm not looking directly at them. I'm almost looking at them out of the periphery of my eye.
That makes sense. What about the idea of the history behind this? Because you didn't study it so carefully, have there been historians or others who have tried to kind of nitpick about some of the facts and...
Oh, no, actually. I'm trying to think. Maybe I've blotted them out of my memory. I do get emails about various things. No, not yet.
That's good.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you do so well is humor, and some people already got a sense of it from you here today. People say humor is sometimes the hardest thing to write, and so how did you learn to be funny on the page? You're obviously funny in real life, but on the page. And what's the difference?
I think it's just a matter of perspective and just part of your DNA. I think when something funny would happen on the page, I would sort of lean into it, and it would sort of surprise me when that kind of comic tone came up. I think there was something about doing all the research that made me feel like that colonialism is so absurd. It's so ridiculous. I mean, the kind of fundamental ideas behind it. And I kind of liked, I think there's a way in which a novel like this sounds very bleak and sad and dark, but I think there's something more interesting and subversive about the colonial subject using humor as a weapon to kind of make fun of the dominant power. And so I liked using humor in that way, and it wasn't something conscious at first, but when it happened, I was like, okay, like, how can I lean into it? How can I lean into this? How can I make the narrative voice, which we think of as neutral, this sort of narrator who's sort of hovering over everybody? I didn't want the narrator to be neutral. I wanted the narrator to kind of sometimes poke fun at these ideas and these absurdities, and so, I mean, to be honest, a lot of my choices in this way come from delight. What delights me? Because I was writing around the time of the pandemic, and I was like, I really just want to have some fun. And so the idea of writing a book about colonialism doesn't sound fun, but it actually was the most fun I've ever had writing a book. And part of it was just kind of finding the humor and the lightness in something that seems otherwise pretty heavy.
As we look at the world today, I often think about the fact that if you don't laugh, you'll cry all the time. You have to laugh sometimes. Are you considered funny at home?
I think I am.
Mom jokes, are they?
I will say, I think I'm the funniest in my family, but when I go to my father's side or my parents, like, especially in Malayalam, which is their native language, I mean, to me...
Any Keralites in the house? Yes, over here too.
Like
two plus everybody here.
I just, my husband is Kutchi, and so we speak different languages, and I just always feel like I can't really express to you how funny my people are compared to your people. No offense, Kutchis, but like the Malayalam movies, like the comedians, so anyway, I feel like I'm not even anywhere close to that level.
We're going to get ready to take some questions from the audience, so please get ready. There are folks with mics that'll come around. But speaking of humor in writing, I want everyone who hasn't gotten the book, of course, to get the book. But in addition, if you want to really laugh about something that a lot of us just complained about, you go to her website at taniajames.net.com, and there you'll find a link to a New Yorker story she wrote in 2020 about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. How many of us have complained about the Temple of Doom, the monkey brains and the Amrish Puri's character, and so many of us have complained, but she did something about it. She wrote a short story that you can find on the website, or just search Indiana Jones and Tania James. You'll find it in the New Yorker. Incredible, laugh out loud story that makes fun of Hollywood and Indiana Jones and tells you how closely she saw the movie and understood everything we were angry about in that movie. And she did that so well with humor. And it ends with a line about the fact that Indiana Jones says there are no more Nazis. And the character says, well, there are still Nazis around. And that's where we are now. So you took something that made so many of us upset and angry and used humor to highlight how bad that movie was in the New Yorker, of all places.
Well, okay, I'll just be honest, though. It was bad. We can all agree it was bad. But Harrison Ford was never hotter than in The Temple of Doom. I mean, right? I mean, that was peak beauty of Harrison Ford. And so I feel like I can't write about something that I don't love at all. And so it was coming from a place of, I absolutely hate this movie, but I can't help but love you still. And so this tension is at work here.
And how attractive he is part of this little story.
Yes, he's very aware of how attractive he is. And there's an Indian moderator who he's sort of, he thinks he's seducing her, but really she's come to confront him along with a room full of Indian audience members about the Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So please search for that. It's also got a fun title. It's called The South Asian Speaker Series Presents the Archaeologist and Adventure Indiana Jones, sort of like a JLF setting in that. So let's see. People are ready with questions. Who's got the microphone? Can we see if the microphones are ready? We'll get back in a second. Can you talk about some of the characters in the book? Because there are so many are larger than life. And who was your favorite? And what can we learn about the book and the story and you from that character?
My favorite to write was, her name is Lady Selwyn, and she is the owner of Tipu's Tiger. She's this kind of aristocratic lady who owns this country house. And at first, I was really sort of intimidated to write her because I really was worried. I mean, I'm not British. I was worried that she would come across as a kind of low-grade Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey character, and I just, like quippy and pucker-mouthed, and I just didn't want to do that. And I was like, how do I make her my own? How do I make her my own? And she's sort of a comic character at first because, she holds all these Orientalist beliefs that we now, from our present day standpoint, can laugh at and be like, oh, how silly people who thought that were. And I just didn't want to have that kind of superior attitude on the past. And so But then I thought, well, what if she is a novelist? And not only is she a novelist, she writes romance novels, she's actually a really good novelist. And then suddenly I had a sort of access to her. I could understand what it might be like to also be an artist, but can never, really, she sort of has to do this art in private. And so that character was really fun because she was one thing in the beginning, and then she kept kind of turning on me and surprising me, which is always the best. Yeah.
When your own characters do it to you.
Yes.
All right. We have microphones. We have questions. So please, go ahead. Somebody has a mic already? I can't see. I'm sorry. Okay. Please take a mic. Introduce yourself, and please keep the question short, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Anthony Kozipat. They call me Tony Kozipat. I published my first book, working on the second, which is very
Congrats.
similar to what your loot is. Question is, have you been to Mysore? Because my second novel, the jump-off point is from Mysore, again
Okay.
Tipu. And I have actually been to Srinagarpatnam when I was a very small kid, but I don't have memories of it. But I want to know if you had
All right. So
visited.
tell us all about Mysore.
Yeah, I actually was writing during the pandemic, so I couldn't travel to India because there was a travel ban at that time. And so I had written the novel thinking, okay, I'll go to Mysore and just, I'll collect whatever little things I've missed, and it won't take me very long. And so I went there, and I went to Srinagarpatna, and I was just amazed by certain things I could not have learned in books. One being that it was all so much smaller than I thought. It really brought home to me how important it was to be part of that kingdom and to be protected by the fort itself, and and it had me thinking about like how your identity would have been shaped by being part of that, inside of that fort and being part of that city. So I spent a few days there, so not a whole lot of time, and I spoke to a couple local historians, but most of the research I did was in books. Yeah.
And as we know, Shakespeare famously never left England and wrote a lot about the various parts of the world, and not some of it you can tell he never went, but others you can't. All right, go ahead, please. Please, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ipshita Ghosh, and do I have to stand up? Okay, I thought it was close enough. I'm Ipshita Ghosh, an aspiring author. So I wanted to know how much of your own personal experiences have seeped into your books, even though they're not autobiographical, and in what form, like in characters or places?
That's a great question. I think my personal life is sort of everywhere in the book, but probably visible only to me. I mean, I think for me, so many of these characters are so far outside of the realm of my own experience that the only way I could kind of write them was by giving them something of myself. And so, for example, there's a sailor, an English sailor, and I was like, how am I gonna write from the perspective of a sailor? I can't even swim. So I gave him my fear of the dark when I was a child. He just has this memory of his mother, how he would call her name with every step into the root cellar. And I used to call my mom's name with every step into the basement because I was afraid of the dark. And I just think sometimes giving a character a small vulnerability that's also your vulnerability can kind of give you the confidence to kind of step into their body. So they're all over the book. There are little things like that.
Okay, we have just a couple of more minutes, so we're going to do some quick questions. Who's got a question, please? Can someone get them a mic?
Hi, Sree. Hi, Tania. Tania, you're funny, huh? Yeah, I was laughing. I was telling Judy, you're funny. Anyway, my quick question is, what is the advice you would give to aspiring, dreaming people who, like me, want to write a book one day for the last 10 years, but has not started? And sometimes I get excited and I sit on my computer and start writing 2-3 pages, and then it is gone. So like something very just to get started.
Okay.
I think accountability is, I think for someone who just listening to what you're saying, I think accountability is the best thing. Finding an accountability partner is something I tell my students. Like, you know, if it's something you have a hard time kind of sustaining and finishing, like having a friend who may be also working on something of their own and being able to tell each other, I did this today. And actually, sometimes it helps to have a mean accountability partner. My agent is sometimes my mean accountability partner, and she, you know, there's no real consequences, but I'm a little bit scared of her. So when she asks me, what did you do? Where you told me you were going to get this done by this day, and I have to say I didn't do it. You know, I feel bad. I feel sad. Not really, but you know, kind of. So I think I think if you already know you can produce, but it's just a matter of consistencies, that person might be it.
All right, we're getting the hook because we have to finish because of the debate tonight, and so we want to make sure we get to the reception before the debate. Last thought for advice for folks you heard who are kind of waiting to get started. What about the people who have a book and they're too afraid to bring it out and like show it to the world? It's already semi-done.
I really believe in community. I think community gives me courage. I sometimes think you can toil in the dark, and one day the thing looks beautiful, and the next day it looks horrible, and you can go on like this forever, toggling back and forth, and never show it to anybody. But I think even just finding 4 or 5 readers who can kind of, you know, give you some sense of where you're at and make you feel less alone. It makes you feel like it's maybe even more possible to send it out into the world if it's ready to do that. So I think finding community is sort of invaluable.
Can you tell she's a professor? Yes. Tania James, everyone.
Thank you so much.